Okay, so I'm gonna start my talk now. So I'm this is going to be quite a relaxed talk. I'm basically going to walk you through a slideshow of what I've been doing for the last 9 months. I will go quite quickly. The chap in the opening keynote said he had a load of slides and he was going to go through them quite quickly. I thought that was quite a leisurely pace compared to what I'm going to do. But so for the last 9 months, I've been trying to make websites dream. And I'm going to go into what I mean by that. You might have seen me on LinkedIn. That might be why you're here. I've been kind of posting about my successes and failures on LinkedIn about that. And this was inspired by Dries, who it was 10th of June last year, he did a webinar with Jamie. And at the end of it, he kind of had this throwaway comment of, this idea that overnight websites could review all of your content and then come up with improvements. And then in the morning, you wake up and you have your copy and you go through and you human in the loop, you review all the content and consider the ideas that it's come up with. And I thought at the time, that sounds really cool. I also went to the AI Summit and I was chatting to the teams there, and I just kind of thought, I think I've got an idea for that I could have a go at. There was one key consideration, which was I didn't want to spend any money. This wasn't a commercial idea. Didn't have a client who wanted to buy it, so I was just doing it in my free time. And it actually aligned quite nicely to a report that used to be produced by the Socratim research group. So they used to do a snapshot of the local authority in the UK. So there's 400 councils in the UK, and they had a team of UX researchers, about 3 or 4 people, who would review 10 journeys across council services for each council website. And that used to take them about a year to do the analysis, because it's a lot of manual reading to do, a lot of research to do and searching. And they summarized it into a 250-page report. Unfortunately, councils are fairly thrifty and quite clever. That's how they operate. So they produced their report and they shared it out as a PDF. And that PDF found its way, then they sold it. And that PDF found its way to most of the councils. So their business model didn't quite work. And the project they stopped doing it in 2017. But I was working in managing consultancy at the time. And it was a real Bible. It was a really, really useful report. It gave councils insights into what other councils were doing and gave them hints as to how to improve. So I knew that was something valuable, and I decided that was basically what I was going to try and reproduce. I'd just like to talk a minute about sleep. So for my watch, apparently this is my sleep cycle a couple of nights ago. So I go into a deep sleep, I have light sleep, I have REM sleep, and I have periods when I'm awake. And during those different periods, particularly REM sleep, that's when actually we as humans, we have kind of creativity and we solve problems and we put right issues that we've had that previous day. Quite often you go to bed with a problem, you wake up, you've got the solution. So I think that's where I feel this talk kind of aligns to the idea of websites. Having dreams. During light sleep, they're going to pull all the content together. During REM sleep, they're going to actually consider, did we answer the question of the customer, and then figure out why not. And then during deep sleep, they're going to kind of turn that into reports. And then in the morning, they're going to share that with their humans, should we say. So that's basically the process that I'm looking to simulate. So simulate the customer experience, starting with trying to find content. So doing a Google search, simulating that, getting AI to look at the search results and pick which one it likes based on the semantics of the metadata, so the description and the title. Then get the AI to follow the content on the page. And that's fundamentally different to, from my awareness, all the other accessibility tools out there. The accessibility tools that are available today, they will tell you whether you are grammatically correct. Have you complied with WCAG 2.2 AA? Have you got alt tags on your images and things? They don't tell you whether you've answered the question that the customer came to the website for. And that's what my tool is kind of aimed to do, is say, have you actually answered the question? And then based on UK government design service kind of BDS, best practice, look at is the page written well for the web? Is it readable? And has it got good editorial structure? So the report I produced, this is actually kind of what ended up being produced at the end, and this has been shared with councils, and it's gone down quite well. But basically, I'm producing 4,000 of these reports, and I'm generating there's extra pages in those reports, so it's a 20,000 page website that I'm generating overnight. Is the intention. Just to give that some context, that is 4,000 squares. So each one of those would be a report. Okay. But as I'm sure many of you know, working with AI, you don't just ask one question. You have to ask lots of little questions. Yeah. So for me to generate that report, I have to ask 10 questions, 10 AI prompts for each report. So now it's actually 40,000 prompts that I'm trying to run in 8 hours. So that's kind of got our challenge into some perspective. I thought, when I started looking at this, and I was chatting to some guys from Drop Solid, Frederic, who's been quite involved in the Drupal AI project and kind of building out the automators and things, I thought, okay, ChatGPT account, install Drupal, get the Drupal AI provider in, get the Google Search API set up, use a simple crawler to go and grab the page, add some content types, add some AI automators to trigger when nodes are saved, run a Drupal batch job to go through each of the journeys, store the output in JSON so that I could push it up to the cloud and then render it using React. ChatGPT, via the API, responses are coming back in about half a second, 40,000 times half a second, 5.5 hours. It's going to fit. Yeah? Anyone see any problem with that? No? So that's I'm going to build up on this model, but that's the kind of architecture diagram that we're looking at. Yeah, ChatGPT pushing to Drupal, pushing to file system, pushing out to cloud storage. This is the problem. ChatGPT has a rate limit, which I'm sure you've experienced if you've tried to ask it lots and lots of questions. And I was quite quickly hitting the 2 million tokens per day rate limit on the price tier that I was on. And I wasn't able to get up to the next price tier. This fact that, it said I could spend up to $100,000 that month, but it still wouldn't let me do more questions. So I realized through automation that actually initially you get warnings and then your IP gets blocked if you go too far. So I threw that idea out the window, started again and thought, how do I get around this? And I'd seen in some public sector reports about the idea of using LLMs. I didn't really know what they were. I asked ChatGPT how to install one, and I was blown away how incredibly, stupidly simple it is to install an LLM locally. It's literally 2, brew commands. So I switched to using Ollama. So this is now the model that I was using. Who's run Ollama locally on a Mac for more than an hour? No? Anyone notice what happens to your Mac when you run Ollama for any extended period of time? Yeah, and I'm looking at running it concurrently or solidly for 8 hours, but I'm like, my Mac's not going to survive this. So I started looking around at other options. Okay, I could go back onto the cloud and maybe I could rent a GPU. And you can see in there's an RTX 3090 that's being rented out at 12 cents an hour, which sounds an absolute bargain. And then I looked at the detailed pages and it was saying, these are, actually it's this guy. So he's got a rack in his garage where he's renting out Bexy graphics cards that he's hooked up to the internet, and he's selling them on a rental basis. And I thought, well, why am I paying him? Why don't I just get a graphics card myself? So I went onto eBay and I started looking at graphics cards. The AI specific graphics cards, they weren't aligning to my I don't want to spend any money concept. However, this one, which is an RTX 3060, was just about big enough to do the kind of models I wanted to do. I thought I could buy that, get a case, get set up. I had a look at eBay as well, YouTube for some ideas around how to create AI servers. This guy was not actually a very good model to follow. It didn't work. This one was slightly better. So then I had a go at this at home. That's the same box as what he had, because like, you've got to be consistent. Unfortunately, I made the mistake of buying on Amazon. I was looking at the power supply units, and I got distracted by one with modular cables, and I ended up buying an ATX power supply rather than a mini power supply, so it was never going to fit inside the box, which was a slight mistake. But I also thought, this just doesn't feel quite right. So I decided, I kept on looking on eBay, and I found you could pick up these old HP workstations for 80 quid. And they are a great unit, plenty of space. So I stuck my graphics card in that box, and I'm away. So I've got this is now my AI farm, advanced future technology in the cellar, lamp included. However, I've got my next problem. They don't run as quickly as cloud. My chats were now taking 30 seconds each, which meant it was going to take 14 days to complete. So I need more GPUs. How am I going to do that when I've got when I've got one graphics card and I want to move to multiple graphics card, I realized I needed to do a few changes to my system. So rather than it being a single process, I split it into multiple steps, and I used controllers and services to split it out to different units. I then brought in RabbitMQ so that I could orchestrate the calling of the services. Set up Linux system services so that when I reboot the machine, they start up automatically using PHP workers to call the instances. Oh, and I brought in another Drupal system so that I could monitor the process and kick things up from the start. So now the diagram's getting a little bit more interesting. We've got a Drupal instance calling queues, calling workers, calling Drupal. The Drupal AI provider, when I was looking at this 6 months ago, and I'm not sure if this has been resolved yet, but you can only have one instance of each type. So I wanted to actually call 4 different Ollama instances. So I used HA proxy as a load balancer to enable me to kind of pass requests out to multiple Ollama instances. You'll notice there's 4 Ollamas down there, but I've only got 2 graphics cards. I found and there wasn't room to fit another one of those graphics cards in that box, but China was getting rid of a load of these graphics cards, which are really, that's the Tesla P4 8GB of RAM graphics card, 70 quid. It runs Ollama okay, it runs the Mistral 7B model. It takes a bit longer to complete, but it worked and it fit in the box. So there we go, I had my 4 graphics cards. Getting there, but it's still not one night's sleep. We're at 3.5 days now, so still need to figure something else out. And it was at this point I went on to the AI channel in the Drupal Slack, and Jay Cos, who I don't know, but the person seems to know a lot about this stuff, was saying, is anyone actually using Ollama? And I was like, I'm new at this, but yeah, I'm using Ollama. And he's like, why are more people not using VLLM? And I haven't heard of VLLM. How many people here have heard of VLLM or used it? No? How many people have heard of Ollama and used it? Okay, so the big difference between the two is Ollama is a kind of wrapper for Llama CPP, and it's not very good at doing things concurrently. If you pass it multiple chats at the same time, I found when I ran 40,000 chats that I was getting quite a lot of failures. VLLM is a totally different beast. When you start it up, you give it parameters to how big you want the tokens, how many concurrent chats you want to allow, and it takes over your graphics card. So immediately it fills up the RAM, and you can run 10 concurrent requests on one graphics card and reliably get all the outputs. And it's got, because obviously one prompt kind of processing is actually thousands of lots of little operations, it's really good at caching. So you get this 30% bump in caching, which is pretty cool. So VLLM sounding like the dream here. Tried to download, couldn't get Mistral 7B working on Llama, but there was a similar one, Quinn 7B, that would work, but it wouldn't boot because the graphics card wasn't big enough. So my investment, it's small, but my investment in these graphics cards wasn't good. I needed to get a 24 gigabyte graphics card. So I didn't go for the RTX 5090. I went for the 3090 because, yeah, it's still affordable. And visually, when you see it online, it doesn't look that much bigger than the 3060. They're quite expensive if you buy them new. And that's actually gone up to that was £1,700 when I first started looking. So that was what the price it is this week if you want a new one. They are a lot bigger than the other one, but I did manage to pick it up for £500 off eBay. So popped that second card in, or took that card out, popped this card in, and I've hit another problem. They generate a load of heat, and there's not enough space in this box to get rid of the heat. So I had to buy or build a whole new box to host the graphics card to try and keep it cool. Someone said to me I should probably have gone with water cooling, and maybe, but I'm a sailor, so I know that water and electronics doesn't mix so well. So, yeah. So I'm going to go a little bit quicker because I'm slightly short on time. But I'm now at the point where I'm using VLLM. I'm using, well, one of the challenges I had was, and apologies to the Drupal AI initiative, but I found that actually, as Jamie was talking about earlier, one of your issues is the chats take a long time to come back. And that doesn't work very well in a single Drupal call. So what I'm doing is I've actually taken the Drupal AI modules out, and when I get to the point where I want to do a chat, I put that I store that as JSON in the file system, and then I have a queue which looks for new messages, and then that processes the AI chat, and then puts the result in the file system, and then kicks off Drupal again to pick up the result and carry on. And that way I can bring in a lot more fault tolerance around if the AI fails, or if it runs out of context, Drupal can still continue from where it had been previously. But your diagram gets a bit more complicated. So I've got my Drupal instance, calling my queues and my workers and my Drupal, putting it into the file system, putting it into another set of queues, putting it into workers, putting it into VLLM, going back up to the other queues, going back through. And I've actually got 17 workers in the top one and about 5 in the bottom one. So there's quite a lot of activity going on when it's all firing off. We're getting there. RTX 3090 can do 10 concurrent chats, 40,000 divided by 10. We get down to 16 hours. So simple answer is get another graphics card. So I popped in another machine, another graphics card. And these graphics cards, these NVIDIA ones, the Founders Edition, they are lovely. They're like a whole different level of cooling. They're much, much better than the Zeus ones. But I have got a few boxes sitting in the cellar. And rebuilding them was taking a real, it's a pain having to rebuild these things all the time. So that's when I switched to using Ansible. So now all of the servers are being automatically built from my Mac laptop, which has a use. And yeah, so that's kind of the next level. The other problem was the CPUs that were, when you buy the lower grade versions of these workstations, they don't come with particularly big CPUs. So I upgraded all the CPUs to 14 cores. You might think that would be expensive. It was £20 a CPU because this stuff's 10 years old. So, it's quite easy to get them tech. Before they had the massive memory price increase in the last 6 months, I was able to get some NVMe hard drives to get that sorted. And I've also made a change in the file system. So where I was using one Drupal instance and writing to the file system, I'm now using MinIO. Who's heard of MinIO? Who's heard of S3 storage? Yeah. So MinIO is basically an open source version of that you can run locally. And the nice thing about that is you can then scale it across multiple nodes. So you can have a fully redundant system using S3 compatible storage, which makes it really easy to then push from one local system up to the cloud. So the only thing that's changed in this diagram is we've now got multiple Drupal instances on the right-hand side, 2 VLMs, and the local S3 storage, which is then pushed into the cloud. We've made it. So I did finally get it to complete in 8 hours. That is the kind of main success of this project. But I guess where I think this introduced some questions is this stuff can be done today. This isn't future tech. And we could have our websites doing all kinds of things overnight to support us. They could be doing reviewing content and recommending improvements. They could be reorganizing content based on marketing trends. If you weren't creating new content, because I don't think you should have AI writing content, they could create new landing pages targeted at new marketing trends and topics that come out. They could self-heal and upgrade as standards come out. They could be automatically applying patches and testing them, running A/B testing to check if they're okay. But I think this is going to create a really interesting question for web hosting, because it needs, you don't just need the AI, you also need a lot more processing power. And modern web hosting isn't about having processing power. It's about caching and sticking it in the Cloudflare and abstracting away. So I think there's going to be some interesting questions that come up for web hosting and how that is sold. And it's something that we should probably be thinking about when we're looking at selling these AI capabilities because of the impact. Lastly, one thing I would say is don't discount the kind of local cheap option. I believe that my use of upcycled old business computers and buying secondhand graphics cards, while I've got obviously a maintenance concern there, I would say I'm probably using 10% of the energy of doing this stuff in cloud. Don't use LLMs, don't use models that are too big. It's surprising what a 7 billion model can do. It's perfectly capable of doing all the AI assessments that I need. It's much cheaper, it's much faster. It's wasteful to throw these things too big. And the other thing is, if this project doesn't work out, I've made an investment on it somewhere else. And it's a lot of fun. Building computers like it's 1990s is, enjoyable. What next for me? So this is actually now turning into a commercial project. I believe I can make a business from this. I've kind of created my dream job because it's a mix of all the things I like doing. And I'm going to be providing audit services to local authorities. I'm in talks with the local Gov Drupal team about how we can do that in partnership. And hopefully also making it an integration for on-demand calls. Thank you. Any questions?
What is your sell-off?
Yeah. How much is your electricity?
So, each of those machines has got a 700 watt power supply. The graphics card, some of them want 300-400 watts themselves. I think I'm using about 2,000-3,000 watts when it's running. And so, it's not much more than a tumble dryer, but it's on for 8 hours, sure. But I suspect it's not bottles of water in data centers scale of energy cost. Heat-wise, yes, there is a bit of heat that comes out of it. Not a huge amount, but yeah. James?
You've got solar panels.
No, but I should do.
Speaking of power, great session, by the way. When this becomes a commercially,
Service.
public product, service, how will you manage SLAs and things like that, or if there's a power surge or an outage, or say just...
Or my internet connection goes off, yeah.
Yeah. Whether it might be the power supply units and a backup separate supply to be able to try and link things to that grid. How would that work?
I see myself offering 2 services, and one thing to bear in mind is this isn't a huge project, but the value of this content review for a local government content designer, they will typically take a day to 2 days per page for guidance. So, giving them, like, I was talking to someone who works at Royal Borough of Kensington, and he was saying, just having 10 reports, that would keep me busy for a month. So, what I'm intending to do is a 500 report-based assessment of a council website, which will give them a plan for 12 months. They don't need it in 24 hours. I can do that in a week. I am looking at doing an on-demand service. And yeah, I will move that part to the cloud to ensure it's available. Yeah.
Hi, David.
Hello, Alan.
That was great. It's nice to see the other side of the chalk. You gave one at local government camp, which is very nice.
I don't think they'd have got it. The content designers at local authority, yeah.
So,
Yes.
So I was curious about the use of Drupal
Yes.
in your process. I didn't really understand the whole of the technical steps of the modelling that you did. But did you use Drupal in Did you use Drupal because we know Drupal? Or was it using Drupal because it was the right tool for it? So I mean, I'm not quite sure what it's doing. I don't totally understand what it's doing in this, but I'm curious about the use of this.
So, one point, Drupal is so flexible as a framework. I'm actually using it for API orchestration. I'm not using the local database. So those instances where you've got the 3 on the right-hand side, they just install, and they're really just hosting the services and the controllers. One of the big advantages I've realized of using Drupal is that when you're, not vibe coding, but when you're, getting AI to generate the code, because Drupal's got such good structure, it's really good at writing nice code. So, that was a definite advantage of using Drupal. And then on the other side, that first Drupal instance, I'm doing much more classic Drupal management activities of kind of creating a custom CRM. So a list of all the websites I want to review, a list of all the journeys I want to review, tracking the status of those journeys. Any more good? Nope.
Sorry, I've got a bulb now, just it got me thinking. If it takes, a couple of days for a person to review one report, down the line, do you envisage creating summaries of what those 40,000 pages might be, or ranking them in terms of highest priority actions down from there to try and make it more digestible? So it's just like imagining quite overwhelming if it was a report of that size like you initially said.
So, I'm talking about council web teams, but this could be a university web team. It could be other people that have got a large content estate. But in a council web team, they typically have an idea of the area they're going to work on. So the idea would be they run the report on the on-demand version before they start the work. It's part of kind of daily work. And then they run it again afterwards to check they've solved the questions that they were hoping to solve. The service that I'm looking to do, that's the 500 based review, would pull in Google Analytics and Google Search Console, as well as some business value benefits for the different, like some services that a council delivers are worth a lot more expensive for the council to deliver than others. So they would get more priority. But the idea would be to give them a prioritized backlog of where to focus, because one of the biggest challenges they have is there's 5,000 pages and they don't know where the problems are. And so this would help them plan their next 12 months of work. But that's why I think it's a huge amount of value.
No, thank you.
Okay.